Kenya is spending billions of dollars building a port, and that port is not really for Kenya alone. It is for two countries that do not even have a coastline of their own. One of those countries has more than 120 million people, and the other has been trapped by war and instability for years. And both of them are looking at the same place in Kenya called Lamu. For Ethiopia and South Sudan, this is not just another Kenyan port, it is another way out for them. But here is the strange part. This project has been talked about for more than 50 years, and the plan has always been the same, which is to connect Kenya's coast to Ethiopia and South Sudan with ports, railways, highways and pipelines. And after 50 years, most of that plan is still unfinished. So why are these two countries still betting on it? And that is the exact story we are getting into right now. Ethiopia has more than 120 million people, and it is one of the largest populations in Africa. But Ethiopia has one massive problem, and that problem is that it has no coastline at all. In fact, no 1 mile of it. And that sounds like a simple geographic fact, but it creates a very serious economic problem. Every container of machinery entering Ethiopia has to pass through another country first. And the same goes for fuel, fertilizers and food. So for decades, that route has mainly run through one country, and that country is Djibouti. Djibouti is a small nation on the Red Sea, and it sits right beside one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. For Ethiopia, Djibouti has become the main door to the sea. Think about what that actually means. More than 120 million people are living in a country whose trade depends heavily on one gateway, controlled by one neighbor. If that port gets crowded, Ethiopian goods sit and wait. If transport costs rise, Ethiopian businesses pay more. And if the relationship between Ethiopia and Djibouti ever turns difficult, Ethiopia has very few alternatives. So this is not a hypothetical problem, it's actually a daily one. Across parts of East Africa, transportation cost alone can eat up to 40% of the value of the goods being moved. And that means a product can lose almost half its worth before it even reaches a consumer. That is the hidden tax you pay for being landlocked. It does not show up in a headline, but it shows up in every price tag. Now, here is where the story gets even more interesting, because Ethiopia is not the only country facing this exact problem. South Sudan is landlocked too, and its situation is even harder because it has also spent years dealing with internal conflict, and that conflict makes its transport route even less reliable. So now you have two countries, and both of them depend on someone else just to reach the ocean, and both of them pay a hidden cost for that dependence year after year. And that is the story this story is built around. Now let us go back to the beginning, because the idea of solving this problem is not new at all. The idea goes back to 1975, when regional planners first talked about building a new port near Lamu and connecting it deep into the interior all the way to Ethiopia and South Sudan. But at the time, nothing really happened because the money was not there and the political will was not there either. So the idea simply stayed on paper for decades. Then, years later, the idea came back. Kenya folded it into its long-term development plans, and by the early 2010s, the project finally became official. Kenya created a dedicated authority to manage it, and that authority reported directly to the presidency. And now the project finally had a name. They call it LAPSSET, Lamu Port, South Sudan, Ethiopia Transport. For years, LAPSSET still looked more like a plan than a real project, and the estimated cost kept rising the whole time. It started around $16 billion, then it moved above $20 billion, and today the figure most people use is around $25 billion. Then something changed. Kenya finally started building the most important part of the entire plan, and that part was the port. A new deepwater port was built at Manda Bay near Lamu, and this was not meant to be a small addition to Mombasa. It was designed to be something much bigger with up to 32 berths and water deep enough to handle ships that Mombasa simply cannot receive. And when the first phase of that port opened, something important happened. A project that had existed only on paper for decades was finally becoming real. But here is the catch. A port by itself does not solve Ethiopia's problem, and it does not solve South Sudan's problem either. Because a port only matters if you can actually move goods to it and away from it cheaply and reliably. So the real question becomes this: what else was supposed to come with LAPSSET? Because LAPSSET is not really just a port, it is an entire corridor. The plan includes a railway stretching close to 3,000 kilometers, and that railway is meant to connect Kenyan coast towards both Ethiopia and South Sudan. Along that railway sits a highway roughly 2,500 kilometers long, built to carry trucks along the same route. And then there are the part most people never hear about. There are oil pipelines planned towards South Sudan and Ethiopia. There is an inland refinery planned at the place called Bagoni. There are 3 internal airports planned, and one of them is at Isiolo. It's already operating actually. There is even a dam planned on the Tana River, built to generate power for the entire development. So when you put all that together, you start to see the real scale of this project. LAPSSET is not simply a port project, it is an attempt to build an entire trade network from scratch. But here is where things get even more complicated, because not every part of LAPSSET is moving at the same speed. The port is functioning and some sections of the highway are already open, while others are still under construction, and that progress is already changing life in parts of the region. But the railway is different. The railway is supposed to be the piece that actually ties these countries together, and it is still largely stuck in its early stages. The pipeline is behind schedule too, and the refinery is even further behind than that. So here is the actual picture. The most visible part of LAPSSET is already running, but the part that could truly change Ethiopia and South Sudan's access to the sea is still for the most part unfinished. And if the hardest and most expensive part of this project are not finished, why does it still matter so much to Ethiopia and South Sudan? And here is why. Because for Ethiopia, having another route to the sea is not just about convenience, it's actually about leverage. And right now, Ethiopia relies heavily on one main route, and a second serious option could completely change that relationship. Even the mere possibility of another route gives Ethiopia more rooms to negotiate. Whether that is negotiating prices, negotiating access, or simply negotiating from a stronger position. Think about it this way. If you depend on only one supplier and that supplier holds a lot of power over you, but the moment you have another option, the relationship changes, because you do not necessarily stop using the first supplier. You simply become less dependent on them. That is exactly what LAPSSET could eventually give Ethiopia. Another option, and another option can create a real bargaining power. So for Kenya, the calculation is different because Kenya already has Mombasa. So you might ask, why does Kenya even need another major gateway? Because Kenya is not only thinking about Kenya. If LAPSSET succeeds, Kenya could become a much bigger logistic hub for the entire region, with goods moving through Kenya towards Ethiopia and goods moving through Kenya towards South Sudan, and Kenya earning from all that trade passing through its territory. That That would give Kenya a far bigger role in East African commerce than it has today. Then there is South Sudan. For South Sudan, the attraction is even more basic because South Sudan needs a reliable route to the outside world, one that does not leave it completely dependent on unstable relationship with its neighbors. A working corridor through Kenya could give South Sudan another way to trade, and for a country in South Sudan's position, that matters enormously. Now, let us step back for a moment, because this is where LAPSSET stops being an infrastructure story and becomes a geopolitical one. In East Africa, a road is never just a road, a railway is never just a railway, and a port is never just a place where ships load and unload. These things create influence. If one country depends on another country's corridor, that dependence matters, and Ethiopia understands that very well. So for many years, Djibouti has been Ethiopia's main gateway to the sea, and LAPSSET offers the possibility of another door. That one does not mean Ethiopia is abandoning Djibouti, and does not mean LAPSSET will replace the existing route, but it could give Ethiopia something extremely valuable, which is choice, and sometimes choice is powerful. And there is another side to this story, because LAPSSET is still a bet, and like any major infrastructure project, the bet comes with serious risk. The biggest problem here has never really been whether engineers can build the infrastructure. The bigger problem has been money. The port managed to secure the financing it needed to move forward, but the railway has had a much harder time, and the pipeline has moved slowly too, because project of this size requires enormous financing, and that kind of money is never easy to secure. There are other pressures as well. Communities along the Lamu coast have raised real concerns about land displacement, and environmental groups have raised real concerns about the impact on the Lamu Delta. And that matters a lot, because the Lamu Delta is not empty land waiting for development. Thousands of people depend on that environment for their livelihood, which means this kind of development can bring real opportunities, but it can also bring real cost. And then there is another problem, and that problem is regional instability. South Sudan's internal conflict are not a small detail in this story. They are actually part of the reason this corridor is needed in the first place, but they are also one of the reasons it is so difficult to complete. This is not a simple success story. LAPSSET is still unfinished. It has taken decades to get this far. The cost has kept increasing, and some part of it could take many more years to complete. Some part may never be completed at all. But here is what I find interesting. Ethiopia and South Sudan are still interested, and they are still putting real political weight behind this project. And that tells us something important. They are not betting on LAPSSET because they believe everything will go perfectly. They are betting on it because the alternative is worse. For Ethiopia, permanent dependence on one single route is a genuine risk. And for South Sudan, having almost no reliable trade route is a genuine risk as well. And for Kenya, LAPSSET offers the chance to become far more important to the economies around it. So when you look at LAPSSET, do not just look at the port. Look at what the entire project could give these countries. More options, more trade, more bargaining power, and potentially more economic dependence. That is what infrastructure really means in this part of Africa. It is not just concrete, it is not just steel. It is about who controls access, and who has another route, and who has enough options to negotiate from a position of strength. LAPSSET may take much longer to finish than anyone originally expected, and part of it may never be completed at all. But the fact that Ethiopia and South Sudan continues to back this project tells us something important, that they do not just want another port, they want another door to the outside world. And in East Africa, having another door can change the entire balance of power. Kindly help me grow this channel by subscribing, like, share this video, and I will see you on the next one.